Genesis today, chapter 13. I think, in fact, all these lessons are from Genesis. Just last week, you guys began the first session in this new unit on talking about and working up through family conflicts, and so we're going to be following this throughout the book of Genesis. And so last week, you learned don't hit your brother in the head with a rock, and too late. And this week we're going to look at Abraham and Lot and the little conflict that they're going to have as well. But as we get ready to begin, I've got a question for you guys. What is game night like at your house? How many of you have family game nights or game nights? I know what game night is like at this place right here. We'll get to that. What's game night like at your house?
Fun. It's just fun.
Just fun?
It's fun.
Okay. I know it's fun when you guys have game night, but it's not just fun.
No. I actually yesterday got by the winter sign and I texted Al. I said, looked up what a winner was on Google, and this came back. And I had the number one up, and how he got fired up because we have game night tonight. And then we have signs that switch every week. Big loser, the big winner. We got the big winner this week. So
y'all hear that? So they have game night every week with Al and Tammy, and they have signs that move back and forth from front yard to front yard depending on who won.
And all the street knows who won game night. Waiting to see which sign.
So it's fun, but it's also what?
very, very competitive.
Very, very competitive, right?
Yes.
So
How can it be fun if it's not competitive?
I'm sure they're a little competitive in yours too, right? Now there are. So who in your family is like the real competitive person? You are. Mm-hmm. Who else? Who else? Anybody else want to fess up? Are you? Yeah. You're the real competitive one. Yeah. There's like a couple games that I just won't play with my family, and I'm usually really competitive. But man, when they play this one card game, it's just too fast for me. I'm too old. I'm too slow. I can't see good enough, and it's just I'm just like, no, I can't play this game, guys. It's just not fun. I mean, when I do play, I'm just fodder. You know, I'm just there to take the whooping every time. But anyway, but yeah, these things happen, right? We can be competitive and things like that. And you're like, how does this apply to this lesson? And where are we going with this? Well, it's even kind of funny how you can be. I remember this one time I was at like a pastor's conference, and we'd been in church all day long. You know what I mean? And we've been worshiping and doing all this stuff. And then we all went and we were hanging out that night, and we decided to start playing some games. And I was like, these are not the same people that I was just with. Right? How did we go from that to this? You know what I mean? But it was all fun. It's all good. But anyway, but those kind of things happen, and those kind of things happen. Sometimes family game nights, and sometimes people get mad and all that kind of stuff. Well, family happens, conflicts happen, and what we're going to see even today is conflicts happen, conflicts come up in relationships, and it's only natural that we are competitive. We want to do what is best for ourselves, but at the same time, we ought to be wanting to preserve that relationship, but we still kind of feel like we have to look out for our own interests, because if we don't look out for our own interests, who will? Right? We get that. Sometimes we can compromise, but sometimes. Who was that? Was that Lynette?
Yes, that was Lynette.
Lynette, I looked at Leanne and said Lynette. I still got hives on my brain. So yeah, we'll blame Lynette. She's not even here. Okay.
Probably do something like that.
But sometimes the best option whenever we get into conflict is to simply put aside our own interests and let the other person win. And I'm just going to tell you that I hate this lesson. I hate the timing of this lesson. Because even in my own life, there's little things that are going on, and I'm just like, I don't want to just give in. I don't want to just let the other person win again. And sometimes you just want to fight. But that's not always the best thing, because sometimes the greater benefit is just preserving the relationship and being a maker of peace. But this takes faith. This takes trust in God, especially when the people that are hurting you are the last people in the world that should be hurting you.
Right
But,
there with you, brother.
huh?
Right there with you.
Yeah, and so it can be a challenge. So let's see what happens in this case study. This passage of scripture actually becomes a perfect case study for how to deal sometimes with some types of family conflicts. Let's just jump right in now to the passage. It's already 20 after, so we better jump into the passage. Somebody read Genesis chapter 13, verses 5 through 8.
Now Lot, who was traveling with Abram, also had flocks, herds, and tents. But the land was unable to support them as long as they stayed together, for they had so many possessions that they could not stay together. And there was quarreling between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. At that time the Canaanites and Perizzites were living in the land. So Abram said to Lot, Please, let's not have quarreling between you and me, or between your herdsmen and my herdsmen, since we are relatives.
Okay, so the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to identify the source of the conflict. And what is the origin of this conflict between Abram's herdsmen and Lot's herdsmen? What's the problem here?
Not enough resources to support what they have.
Okay, that's one way to look at it, and that's the accurate way to look at it. Another way to look at it is they've got too much. Isn't that funny? You know, because oftentimes what do we think? Oh, if we just had more stuff, that'd solve all our problems. If we just had more, we wouldn't have any worries. We wouldn't have any issues. But guess what? Sometimes having stuff causes problems, right? And so there's not enough resources to support everything that they have. They are both relatively wealthy people. They just come back from Egypt. They're a little sojourn down into Egypt. They had to leave Canaan and go down into Egypt to get away from the famine. And even when they left, they had a lot, right? Because it talks about all their herds and all the people and everybody that went with them, right? And they come back out of Egypt and they've got even more, right? Because now they've still got all these herds, they've got all these flocks, they've got all these people that are traveling with them, and they've also, previous verses tell us they come back with a lot more gold and a lot more silver and all these types of things. And so that's the source of the conflict. They are herdsmen. That's their occupation. And the area that they came out of, down around the Negev, and that area was very sparse, so very hard for them to stay there. Now they've moved up into this area, back up closer to Bethel, and a lot more water, a lot more grass, a lot more grazing available there. But even there's still not enough resources, water and grass, to support all of them and all of the livestock, that they have. And so this is what is going on. They just simply can't stay together. They've got too many people, and there's just not enough land and natural resources to go around. And this starts up family game night for them. Okay? Competition kicks in between their herdsmen. We've got to have water, right? We've got to have grass. And so competition kind of kicks in between them, and competition is often the great perpetrator of dissension and divisiveness, and all these other things start to set in, right? So we got herdsmen that are trying to do what's best for Abram. We got herdsmen that are trying to do what's best for Lot. And it doesn't necessarily say they like biting like physically, but it's getting to that point quickly. Then there's kind of a little line that's slipped in there. And it's actually in your quarterly, they put it in parentheses. At that time, the Canaanites and Perizzites were living in the land. Why is that noted? Why do you think that is noted? I think there's a couple different possibilities here.
Somebody was watching.
I think that's the main part. Okay? Another possibility is they're not the only ones that are competing for those resources, right? And that's the part that I think most people, most of our minds would probably go to first. But Lynn, I think that's the other thing that we need to keep in perspective.
I.e. our neighbors.
Our neighbors are watching, right? And I think this is the perspective that Abram has. The Canaanites and Perizzites are in the land too. And they're watching. And these are supposed to be the people of faith, right? And even in what's going on with me a little bit this morning is people are watching. And so how are we going to handle it? How are we going to deal with it? And go on. And I think that there's also a third possibility. If they're divided, they're also an easier target for their possible enemies. Okay? But I think yours is the best, Lynn. I really do. I think that is noted in there for that very, very reason. So, because oftentimes division among the people who claim to be the people of God, the people of the Lord, weakens our testimony, right? It weakens our claim of just being just that among people. And so sometimes we have to set aside things and just kind of rise above, and sometimes you gotta let the other person win. But Abram is not going to settle for living in strife or completely ignoring this situation. And he demonstrates a lot of maturity, and he confronts the problem, right? And how does he begin to confront the problem? What's he do?
He gives Lot first choice of where he wants to go.
Okay. Yeah, he's going to do that. But first, he goes to Lot, right? He goes to Lot. And it's interesting that that's where he goes. Because, let's just put it this way. Abram's the boss. Right? He's the head of this whole thing. He's the head of this whole clan, right? And what are the places that he could have went? Well, he could have went to his own herdsmen. He could have went to Lot's herdsmen. He could have got all the herdsmen together and said, hey, I'm not going to put up with this. We're going to work this out. You know what I mean? But instead of involving all these other people, he just goes to Lot. Right? And his primary concern is, first, he just wants to deal with his relationship with Lot. Hey, let's not let there be quarreling between who? Us. Right? Let's take care of this. Let's set the example for how we're going to handle this and how we're going to, work this all out. And so he says, let's not have quarreling between us because we're family. We're relatives. So let's not have this between us. And so Abram wants to push for this harmony between them. So Any other thoughts? Any other questions here on this first section?
Deborah wanted to express her thoughts, and she says, first he went to the Lord in prayer.
Does he?
Good question.
I think we're going to see some stuff coming up here later that is going to show us that, yeah, he's primarily concerned with God and representing God. I think that's why we even talked about the thing with Lynn. But that's not really in the text. But we're going to see that God's going to speak here in a moment at the end.
But do you think Lot realized the source of his wealth? He was a benefactor.
Yes, sir.
I mean, it doesn't spell it out word for word in the scriptures, but if you look at it as a whole, Lot was more concerned with the physical possessions.
Yes.
You know. So.
And there is something to that here, guys, and that is, and this kind of goes along with what Deborah's saying and what you're saying as well. Life is a journey, guys, and what one of the things that we learn from Abraham, and we watch from just watching Abraham's life and his really what we're learning about in all of Abram's life, we're learning about faith. God is giving us a lesson on what it looks like to live by faith. And what you see in Abram is journey. His whole life is moving. It's a journey. And your journey is either going to be driven by faith or it's going to be driven by circumstance. Everyone is on a journey. And there's way too many people out here that their lives are being driven by circumstance. And that's what we're going to see with Lot. You're going to see two paths diverge here. One of faith, a journey of faith, and another that's just going to keep being driven by circumstance. Circumstance is going to continue to drive Lot's life. And my question is, what are you being driven? On your journey today, are you living a journey of faith? Now, it may mean that's unsettled. You know what I mean? I'm not saying it's easy, because the journey of faith is a challenge. It's uneasy, it's unsettling, it's constant movement and constant change. But you have God, or you're just driven by circumstance. How many of you know so many people today that their lives are just driven by circumstance? Right?
It's easier to be driven by circumstance.
Why is that?
Because you're going to default to your emotions. Emotions are natural.
Yeah, and you also have a blame.
Yeah.
It's not my fault. This happened, this happened, this happened.
It takes no thought process. It's just a knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah, yeah.
So Steve, I pictured a leaf in the wind, like, you know, the leaves are falling now, I just tossed around by whatever's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
But even in our life of faith, we still have circumstances.
Absolutely.
It's just it's how we respond to those circumstances.
Because
By
Abram's
faith.
got a circumstance here, right? And he's got to deal with it. And he is going to display a level of spiritual maturity that we have not yet seen in his life. Because like just a chapter or so ago, he's saying, Sarah's my sister. Right? So, I mean, he's growing, right? And he's becoming more spiritually mature. And he's gonna, and all of a sudden, and why did he say she was his sister?
prayed for his life and his possessions.
Exactly. And now all of a sudden, he's going to value relationship over possessions. Right? And so we see this growth happening right before our eyes. Okay? All right. So let's go ahead and read verses 19 through 11. And this is where Joe was talking about, but where we're going next.
Isn't the whole land before you? Separate from me. If you go to the left, I will go to the right. And if you go to the right, I will go to the left. Lot looked out and saw that the entire plain of the Jordan, as far as Zoar, was well watered. everywhere like the Lord's garden in the land of Egypt. This is before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose the entire plain of the Jordan for himself. Then Lot journeyed eastward and then separated from each other.
Okay. So what is the solution that Abraham proposes for settling this dispute between their two herdsmen and preventing any breach of relationship between the two of them? What's the solution?
Separate.
He gave him choice. He gave Lot choice.
Okay, so he gave Lot the choice and to separate, right? Okay, we just gotta separate. We're too big, right? We just can't, it's just not practical for them to stay together anymore, right? So we gotta separate in some way. And in that, he gives him the choice. Why does Abram let Lot have first choice?
It's his decision. It's his decision.
Okay?
And if there's an obvious good choice, then there's an obvious, maybe not so good choice, based on what you can physically see.
Okay?
He had some insight into future scripture where we're told to not only look after our own interests, but the interests of others.
Philippians 2:4.
What was that?
Philippians 2:4.
Okay?
I think he's trying to keep peace between the two of them.
Yeah. Yeah. He's really setting us. I mean, I told you earlier, he's the boss. He could have chose, right? He could have, there were other options here, right? It isn't just, you get all this and I take what's left over. They could have split this up some other more amicable way, right? But they don't do that.
Do you think maybe it's too because he wanted to see if Lot shows his true colors?
Yeah, maybe. But I mean, there is but in the midst of all of this, can't lose the sight of the fact that Abraham loves Lot. You know what I mean? And there's really no indication that they have a bad relationship at all. In fact, in just another chapter, Lot's going to be taken captive, and here comes Uncle Abram to the rescue, right? Mm-hmm. Later on, before Sodom and Gomorrah get destroyed, Abram's going to be interceding, you know what I mean, on behalf of the people and on behalf of Lot and his family and all of these types of things. So there may be a little bit of that for sure, but don't get that. I don't want you to think that there's like, you know what I mean. He really wants to preserve this relationship because Lot is really kind of like a son to him. I mean, I know it's a nephew, but he's been with him on this journey the whole time. Lot's father has died much earlier in the story, and so he's kind of raised him, And I think there's also maybe just a little bit of a hint of, hey, I'm going to give you this choice because I believe in you. I trust you. You know what I mean? But Lot doesn't make a fair, you know what I mean, a really good decision at all.
And you were talking about how he was growing in faith. You think that the words before in chapter 12 was in his head thinking, well, God's going to take care of me. He's going to give me what he told me he's going to give me. So it really doesn't matter which way Lot goes because God's going to take care of me.
Right. And I think that is in his mind. And if it isn't at the forefront of his mind right now, it's definitely coming back here at the end, you know what I mean, in the next verses as God speaks. Because God's going to speak this right back into him. But you're right, Rhonda. I think you see that though. I think you see this. I think what we see is this maturing faith. You know what I mean? And this is like a big moment for Abraham. So many times we look at this and we think about all the really poor choice that Lot makes. But at the same time, we're going to see God's hand. We're going to see God's provision. And And when you first kind of read it, it sounds like what Abram got was just really the default, not very good. But what we find out later on is Hebron is a good place, right? We find out that the oaks around the Hebron and that area actually becomes a really good place for livestock, and you know what I mean, and all these different types of things. And not to mention the fact that there's also this spiritual journey that they're both on, and I think we see this, and we've all kind of commented on this, but almost every time in the Old Testament somebody turns east, it's a picture of turning away from God. And Lot's choosing to go eastward, away from God. And Abram's going to go to the west, and that's almost always in the Old Testament moving back toward God for whatever reason. Just a little tidbit there.
Steve, also, God had already promised Abraham to give him the land of Canaan.
Yes.
So
all of it.
yeah.
Yeah, and we're gonna definitely gonna get to that.
And Lot would have known that. He would
Huh?
have known that promise that Abraham had. Lot would have known this.
Right.
He would have known this.
Yes.
He said, here's a chance for me to have enough. Maybe, I don't know.
No. I'm yeah.
But Lot would have known this.
Yes.
He would have known that promise that was given Abraham.
Yeah.
Which is interesting in the negotiations.
Right. Right. So what's influencing Lot's decision? What choice did Lot make, and what's apparently influencing his decision?
It looked like a lush land, great for,
Yeah, I mean the description of this land is pretty darn good.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure if Dustin lived around this, he'd want to acquire this piece of property.
That's just what I was thinking. I thought that was black dirt.
Yeah, that was some good dirt, right? I mean, it is some good dirt. I mean, listen to this description. They are basically saying it reminds them of the Garden of Eden. That's some good dirt, right? And then it's like, and it also kind of reminds them, if it doesn't remind them of that, at least it's as good as the land they just left in Egypt down around the Nile, right? And that was some good dirt, right? And so, but what else is wrong with it?
it's right next to Blue City.
Oh my God! Somebody went there. Oh my goodness sakes. Oh my, you're terrible. You're terrible. But it's worse than that, right? It's right next to Sodom. It's right next to Gomorrah, right? And that is not a good thing, right? And that's just kind of thrown in there, right? And then we leave out that verse in our commentary. You know, verses 12 and 13 is not a part of the focal passage. But it does kind of enlarge our understanding of the outcome of the choice that both Lot and Abram make here, right? More than geography, the description of their decisions kind of are spiritually telling, right? It's flat. It's in a plain. It's got good dirt. It's got good water. It's easy. Hills, mountains, rough, right? Not easy. And there's a real telling statement in here, right? What's the real telling statement about Lot in this? What influenced his decision above everything else? He chose, determined on what he believed was best for him. I'm just going to do what's best for me. Nothing in the text, kind of going back to what Deborah was talking about, right? Nothing in the text suggests that he made any attempt to understand God's will. His decision was about Lot. Not about Abram, not about the Lord, just about Lot. But living in this plain, near a city known for great wickedness, was not an ideal place for a righteous man to dwell. Okay? So I'm going to take your blue and red out of this, right? But to be near it is just a step away from being within. He chose to go live near. When the angels come to rescue Lot and his family, where are they? They're in. They're not just living near the city. They're in the city. Abram, on the other hand, dwelled in the hill country of Canaan. And this was the place that the Lord had brought him. And Abram is about to learn more about what it means to live by faith and not by sight. Everything Lot is doing is driven off of what he sees. I see fertile valley, abundant water, big fancy cities with progressive thinking. I want to go live near that. And Abram is going to turn to the hills, back to the place where God originally gave him the promise, where he originally built an altar, and he's going to go and build another one in that same area again. And he's going to live with an eye not on prosperity, but Lynn, he's going to put his eye back on that promise. Several of you have mentioned it. The promise, the promise, the promise. Okay? And he's going to go back that direction. So, we got about 15 minutes left. I want to get to this last part because it's probably the most important part of this whole lesson. So somebody read for me verses 14 through 18.
After Lot had separated from him, the Lord said to Abram, look from the place where you are. Look north and south, east and west. For I will give you and your offspring forever all the land of the sea. I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone could count the dust of the earth, then your offspring could be counted. Get up and walk around the land, though its length and through its length and width, for I will give it to you. So Abram moved his tent and went near to the oaks of Merah at Abram, where he built an altar to the Lord.
Okay. Sometimes when it comes down to resolving conflict, we got to put others first. We've got to develop an attitude that is more focused on others, more focused on relationships, even if it means we sacrifice our own benefit. That's not easy. Right?
Right.
And it's hard. And so sometimes it's hard. And I just want you to stop for just a minute. And I know Abraham is the father of faith, and we see him as this patriarch, this hero. And even here we see him doing the right thing for the benefit of his nephew. But just for a moment, I want you to put yourself in his place at this moment. The decision's been made. He's watching Lot depart to the lush land to the east and the north of Bethel. And Abram is left behind. At that moment, does he feel like a winner? Or does he feel like a loser? And I know that's kind of a hard way to put it. But at that moment, does he feel like he's been taken advantage of? He gave Lot the choice. Lot could have chose it different. There were other options.
I know I'd like to have been a fly on the wall of the tent of Abraham and Sarah after that.
And that's what I'm asking. That's kind of what I'm asking you to do, right? Put yourself there. He settled for the second best, at the very least, second best portion of the land. It didn't have to be split east-west. It didn't have to be split that way. It could have been split other ways.
Steve, the thought I had, it kind of related to your question, but backdoor of it, that Lot may have chose the easiest land, but Lot may have underestimated the effort of temptation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And Abram may have seen that in the making. And, if he's wise as I think he would, he probably saw that. That's the beginning of that process set in motion.
Have you ever second guessed this decision? No. Have you ever, in the moment, you're like, this is what's right. This is what's best for the relationship. You know, it's kind of like the family counselor that tells the husband, do you want to be right or do you want to be married? Right? So, I think here in this moment, he's done all the right stuff, but in the moment I think he's sitting there and he's wondering, what have I done? What did I just do? And I think there is even an element here that he is wondering if he has compromised the Lord's promise. You think about that? Is that a possibility? Because who's the promise to? Abram, right? But I think he may be wondering if his action of giving Lot a portion of the land in exchange for peace has somehow, in some way, compromised the Lord's promise because of what happens next. Immediately now, what happens?
See, think, the decision that I make for myself is just not for myself.
Right.
It impacted his whole side.
Yes.
So the thing is, he may have kept the relationship with Lot, but what about grumbling, dissatisfaction within all the people, even within his household?
Sure.
Because his decision, like, when your children make decisions, oh, it's only affecting me. No. That's what I think of.
Yeah.
Because now he's got to contend with the many people that are saying, why didn't we go that way?
Right. Yeah, that's good. That's a good point. I mean, because like I said, he's the patriarch. He's the leader, and I'm pretty sure there was some jealousy and rivalry between these herdsmen that are working for these two different bosses, almost. You know what I mean? And it's like, man, do we ever get the short end of the stick? Right? But
Steve, there's that. I mean, Abram was obviously, the way I read it, he was obviously bummed out after this because the Lord lifted up his eyes.
Yes.
Said, lift up your eyes.
yeah, absolutely, and that's right where I'm going to, because I think in this moment, I think we can just skip over it, and we just think, okay, well, Lot went this way, Abram went this way. Hey, God's going to speak. Well, how come God had to speak? Because Abram needed God to speak. I think in this moment, Abram's sitting there going, right? I mean, the sign just got put in his yard. I mean, I hate to bring back that family game night, but the sign just got moved over into his yard. But I do like that at least you're putting a positive winner sign. It started out as just a loser sign, so they're growing in their game night relationship as well. But
Lot was kind of his son.
and it was, yes,
So there's probably disappointment.
yes. It hurts. It hurts when people hurt you that shouldn't hurt you. Right? And so, but yes, I think as you read what God says, I think Abram is sitting there at the entrance of his tent. He is sitting, his head is down, he is downcast, he's downtrodden, he can't believe where he's at, and then all of a sudden God says, lift up your eyes. Don't be downcast. And then he's going to tell him, get up and move. Right? Get up and walk. Look from the place where you are. Look north and south, east and west, for I will give you and your offspring forever the land that you see. What's changed? Nothing. Nothing's changed. This was a reiteration of the Lord's original promise to Abram. And I think the fact that you mentioned that Lot was like a son to him, this promise is all about descendants, of whom Abram has 0. And the closest thing that he ever had has now chosen something that's leaving him behind, leaving him out. But the Lord, and then the Lord reaffirms the promise of multiple descendants, because he goes right on to say, and I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone could count the dust of the earth, then your offspring could be counted. And later, God's going to reaffirm this promise again in chapter 15, and he's going to say, I'm going to make your descendants as many as the stars of the sky. Try counting that too, see how far you get, right? And so, here's the thing. This speech is what the whole narrative is about. Everything that happened before this is about this speech. It's about these 4 verses. The entire narrative exists for the purpose of this speech, for God to speak. Abram doesn't know what he risked at the end of verse 9. And here's the thing, the promise always lies outside the purview of the person of faith. It's always still out there. But I think at the same time, it's not too much to suggest here that Abram kind of anticipates the teaching of Matthew chapter 6, verse 15, where it says, but seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you as well, right? God says, get up and look, north, south, east, west. Everything that you see, it's going to be yours, and it's going to be your descendants, for your descendants. And so, just this whole reiteration of promise of, look, I've got you. You can trust me. Even whenever everybody else fails you, even when the people that shouldn't fail you, you can trust me. Nothing about the promise has changed. God is still going to see this thing through, and he's still going to see Abram through in the midst of all of this, okay? The promise hasn't been altered. The promise hasn't been negated. The promise was his promise, right? And it's not even dependent on Abram's ability. It's all just dependent on the sovereign ability and the holy faithfulness of God to fulfill what he's already promised that he's going to do, right? And I love that reaffirmation of this promise with this with this immediate call to action. Get up and walk. You know what? Sometimes whenever you're feeling down, you know what the best thing you can do? Just get up and move. Get up and move. Don't just stay there. Don't just sit there. Don't just get up and move. And get back to leading your clan. Get back to tending the flocks. Get back to tending the herds. Get back and you know what? You just got to get up and go again. Right? Whatever the situation is, anytime we fail, anytime we stumble, anytime we feel like we've had a setback, just get up. Start again. go again. And even though Abram is going to travel the land, he's going to move his tent. He's going to go and live near the oaks of Mamre at Hebron, and he's going to establish his residence there. Really, I know he's going to continue to move about. This is going to become his residence, kind of his base of operations, if you will. And the neat thing that's going to happen as soon as he goes there, he's going to do what? He's going to go build another altar. And so all of this, he's moving closer to God, right? Lot's moving away. Abram's moving in another direction, not only geographically, but spiritually. He built an altar to the Lord. And the outward appearances may be that looks like Lot may have fared better in this exchange, but we know that's not going to be the case, right? God is going to be with Abram, and the promise is still going to remain, and promise is going to be sure, and Abram is going to learn to continue to trust God in every situation, in every circumstance. Okay? So, what other thoughts, what other questions? Anything I missed that you want to point out, or any question that you have? Hey guys, conflict in relationships, it's inevitable. Even among family. And the instances of family dissension, especially over the allocation of or the rights of stuff, it can be sad. But the critical issue is, how are you going to respond? And it's not just in family relationships. I think for us, it's also to remember that in the family of faith and in church relationships, are you going to allow a conflict to fester and continue to threaten that relationship? Or are you going to be like Abram and model the meekness that he did in his approach to this conflict resolution, and that he was willing to submit? Simply because his life was centered on faith and the promise of God. And I think his model is a worthy one to replicate, and it's consistent with the message of Christ, who's going to come into the world centuries later. But how could a conflict that you're facing be solved simply by your willingness to submit your interests to those of the other person, and then just trust God with the outcome? It's not easy. It can be a challenge, and it can be hard. But God is faithful, and God's promise to you, much like to Abram, will remain, and he will be faithful to you. All right, guys, have a great morning, and great to have all of you here today. Next week, I want you to be thinking about favorites. How many of you were the favorite? Some of you just said it wasn't me. Some of you, well, we're going to talk about you favorites next week in class, and those of you that weren't favorites as well. But we'll talk about Isaac and Rebekah and favorites next week. Well, you weren't in here when I thanked you for filling in for me last week. Well, thank you, man. I appreciate it. Oh, yes. I heard so many good things. I heard so many positive things. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah?
Yes.
behind the slow connection button.
Way to stay out of the way so everybody can get going. Looking after their own.
Right on. Thank you so much for doing it. I appreciate it very, very much.
Tuesday morning was the beginning of one of them. Gail knows there. I was walking to it. That's like me. Oh, no piano player at church. That's an emotional.
Oh, Daryl.
I didn't get a chance to thank Daryl for volunteering.
Gotcha.
I was thinking I almost commented that there.
Yeah.
Never happened.
Waller better, I guess, the other, but the outcome's still not going to be perfect.
Morning, Jim.
Kirsten had that.
Okay, she's probably taking it all the way up to front.
Maybe she has. I don't know.
Yeah, I passed her.
She usually sets it out here though.
Sorry, my button's hidden.
The color of it. It used to be a dark area. Yeah.
I'm gonna cut them out.
I'll never notice.